I've actually heard of people making videos for their caregiver, and that's a really good way to do training, and it's a good way to refer back to how to use different kinds of equipment and that kind of thing. And that's worked out well. You're going to keep communication open to avoid problems. A lot of times what people will do is they'll use a log, and the caregiver who comes in will write down what they did with that person for the day, so that it's clear to you that, you know, if you have certain expectations that they're met, and that it's clear to them what they've done and the importance of what they've done. And these are really specific questions, but it's a really important part of being a private employer of a caregiver. Every employee is required to complete an I-9 form, and the employer keeps this on file. So you can get an I-9 form on the internet, but the person that works for you has to fill that out. And you have to keep that on file. You have to verify whether or not your renter's or homeowner's insurance covers employees if they are hurt in your home. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So you're going to want to know that. You're going to want to find out about federal and state tax regulations for household employees. And I've listed this here. In California, you call the Employment Development Department at 1-888-745-3886 to get the Household Employers Guide, which I have with me. Just a small document. But you'll want to get a copy of one of these. Very important. For the federal information, you're going to want to see tax publication 926, which I also brought a copy of. All these you can download from the internet, or you can also call and get copies. But this is the federal guide. It's really important to have copies of both the California and the federal guide. So finally, I'd just like to leave you with the resources that I used to put this together. You can get more information from the Del Mar Caregiver Resource Center. We have a bunch of fact sheets on how to hire in-home care. The Del Mar Caregiver Resource Center can be reached at 459-6639. Ask for Christina. The National Caregiver Library, www.caregiverslibrary.org, is where you can get that in-depth needs assessment that I talked about. If you do that needs assessment really well, it'll really help you create a really good job description. The IRS publication 926, the Household Employers Tax Guide. So there'll be time for questions at the end.
Some excellent information so far. I'm going to be a little bit more specific because the job I do tends to focus primarily on persons who are in trouble. And hopefully what we hope to avoid is any of you or any of your loved ones ever being in that position. Rather than reacting, we want to be proactive. We want to give you some ideas, some tools that if you follow them, should pretty much give you a leg up on getting stuck in a situation where you're thinking, oh my God, how did this happen? You never saw it coming. And I, like my boss said, I've been doing this for a long time, longer than I care to remember it. Who should know better than myself? I mean, come on, this is what I do. I'm going to share with you something. I have an elderly father, and 5-6 years ago, we were in the position of looking for someone to come in, not so much health care, but companion care. He wasn't far enough along where things were slipping, where he couldn't care for himself, but he really did enjoy company, and we thought it would be good to have somebody there just during the day for some hours to provide companionship. And so did I follow the steps or the procedures that I tell everybody else to follow? No. Now, why, may you ask, didn't you follow your own advice? I'll tell you, and this is one of the pitfalls, and you just got to remember. We had some really good friends who had known my father for a long time, and they said, hey, we know somebody. In fact, this person went to school from grammar school. They had known this lady their entire life. I thought, oh my God, what could be better? Somebody that's got a connection, it's an automatic vouch. Just let all our guard down. Hired this person, very nice person, but who isn't on the initial interview? I mean, that's when we're on our best behavior. Face it, when we start dating, we're on our best behavior. Everybody's on their best behavior, so that is not really a litmus test of what you're getting into. So she sounded appropriate, she seemed to hit it off with my father, and everything seemed good. Until. There's always an until to a story like this. My wife happened to come home unexpectedly to my father's house just to drop in, and she just thought she'd listen for a little bit. They were in the living room, she was in the kitchen, but she could hear. And what did she hear? She heard the care provider in sort of a little louder than normal voice. Sounded like she was chastising my father and saying, "Now, Bob, where is that signed, notarized document that I've been asking you for?" Exactly. Good sign, bad sign. How many say good? What's one of the most important, valuable things that people who are along in life have in this world? It's their home. Generally, the home is paid for, or close to it. Didn't even want to find out what that document was about. How many think we kept her? Nope, absolutely not. Absolutely the worst thing you can find out. But better we found out before than after. The cases that are after the fact, that's what comes into our office. Those are the ones where we think, oh my God, what can we do to try and stop this? Worst case are the houses that have been sold, or the mortgage haven't been paid, or they've added more debt to the house that now is impossible to pay off. So that's what we want to avoid. And how do you avoid that? I mean, if somebody's tricky enough, if somebody's determined enough, they can slip by. But what can you do to make it harder? Okay, knowledge is power, and we live in an age when there's lots of knowledge, lots of resources available. Unfortunately, in California, as a private person, and I'm talking now about hiring a private caregiver, not through an agency like Lifespan, who does a lot of the work for you. They do the criminal background checks. They vet the sources. They act as your first line of defense. So when you're getting somebody from a reputable agency like Lifespan, you've already has some assurance that these persons that they're providing have passed striped background tests. But what can you do as an individual? Let's say you're thinking about doing it on your own, or a family member. You can't just go on the internet, unfortunately, in California and push a button and say, give me a person's criminal background data. It doesn't work for private citizens, but what can you do? Two important things. Well, three important things. I don't know if you all have it. I printed out, and this by no means is an end-all application. It's very generic, but it has a lot of different areas of information that you, as a potential person hiring somebody else to come into you or your loved one's home, should definitely know. Have an application ready for the person. And like was previously said, don't stop at just one. We don't want any type of impulse buying. This is not a car lot. This is somebody you're letting into your sacred home that then has access to many, many significant pieces of information about you or your loved one that you don't want anybody else in the world to know about. I mean, you're giving them the keys basically to the kingdom in a manner of speaking, so you need to be very careful. So, you have an informational sheet, something like this, that has a lot of questions that you want answered. You ask, without question, two of the requirements you want of any person that you're going to consider. You say, I want you to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I want you to bring me a current DMV printout of your driving history. Two things. It will tell you if they're a good driver. There may be some information you're not too happy about. 3 or 4 accidents, a couple DUIs, failures to appear, that type of thing. But it will also confirm that who you're talking to at least matches the person that's on that DMV printout. Anybody can go to Department of Motor Vehicles, it costs them like $12. If they're really interested in being employed, they should willingly do it. The other thing you tell them is go to the credit bureau. There's one in Watsonville for $23.50. The individual can get their own credit history. It'll be an Experian report that will give you that person's printout. It will have their date of birth. It will have their social security number. It will have their credit history and their credit score. Now, if you see a bunch of crazy debts that are past due and have been charged off, if you see a bunch of bankruptcies, if you see a bunch of liens by the federal and state government, how many think this is a good individual to take on into your home? Again, compare the information on the report with the information you get from the Department of Motor Vehicles and a copy of the driver's license that you have them give you. If they don't have a driver's license, get a California ID card. If they don't have either, I don't know. You may still satisfy yourself. I would be hesitant. Why? How do you contact this individual if they can't provide any ID as to who they are? How do you find them? Just think it through. I mean, these are a couple of really basic things you can do. Somebody may give you a lot of hassle. I don't want to do that. Hey, this is too much work. I'm not doing this. Forget it. I'm out here. Hey, good for you. You've lost somebody you didn't want to have anyway. I mean, think about it. Inside the home, what do they have access to? Possibly your banking information, possibly your personal ID information, credit cards, credit statements, your driver's license, or your loved one's driver's license, social security, any number of things. And again, the world I deal with, crooks love this stuff. You or your loved ones in another part of the house, they have access to the kitchen drawer that has past old bills, bank statements. This is a gold mine for somebody with evil intent. You don't want somebody like that having access to you or your loved one's home. So thinking through these things is something that's very important. Now, once you have the information, and another thing, never conduct the interview by yourself. No, 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 no. Always helps to have a second or third pair of eyes and ears. Your family member, your friend, your neighbor may hear something or get a vibe totally different than you're picking up. And you can compare notes afterwards. I mean, this is a really good way of ferreting out, whether it's a good fit or not. And again, never make the decision right there on the spot. Always have the information presented to you. And so you can consider it. And then again, go over the various applicants' backgrounds with the person or persons that you've had sit in on the interviews with you. Compare notes, make sure everything lines up. I mean, if the person is really worthy and interested in having a job, they will come back. They will put through because they wouldn't want anything less for their loved one. I mean, this is a very important position that you are embarking on. And again, pros and cons, legitimate, viable agency, they do a lot of this for you. Now, some red flags, even if you get a care provider, God forbid, through a registered agency, because you can't vouch for everybody 100%. What if you go into your family member's home after a provider has been hired, privately or through an agency? And, mom or dad's mail is usually kept on the kitchen counter, which it probably shouldn't be, but it normally is, and you start noticing mail doesn't seem to be around anymore. And mom or dad can't really recall where it is, or they're not aware of it. Missing mail is a big thing. Missing mail should always be put in a certain place, should be kept out of the general area, but if you start noticing missing mail, if certain bills start coming in with past due notices. You've got to ask yourself what's going on in the normal course of things if your loved one is still responsible for making those payments. Never allow the care provider to take over financial obligations to take care of making payments. Don't give them personal information. Don't give them bank accounts. Heaven forbid, don't put them on the bank accounts. Don't give them keys to the car. They don't need keys to the house. And let them know definitely you are going to be popping in from time to time, or the neighbor across the street is going to be popping in from time to time, that people are watching. I mean, you're not really being heavy-handed. You're being concerned, and you're sharing that concern with the person that's now going to be given the task of coming in and taking care of your loved one. It can't hurt. Okay, so now what? What happens? Worst case scenario, you've done everything you can. You've been diligent. You've had your eyes and ears watching all along. And now you see clear signs that something's happened. Suddenly a foreclosure notice shows up on the door. Suddenly you've got creditors calling you saying, what's wrong with these other payments that haven't been made? Who do you turn to? There are several agencies, several sources that you should immediately contact. If it's in a home, not a non-skilled facility, assisted living or nursing facility, if you're still in a single-family residence, Adult Protective Services, you can call them and make a referral. Say, I think something is going on. You need to give them the address, the information, but they can do a home assessment. They can do a home check to see if things are okay. If it's in a skilled facility or something along those lines, the Ombudsman's office has jurisdiction of people that are in those types of facilities. If you know flat out that something of a criminal nature has taken place, immediately contact either the law enforcement agency in a city, if it's in Santa Cruz City, Capitola, Watsonville, Scotts Valley. Their police department has jurisdiction. If it's in the unincorporated area of the county, contact the sheriff's department. They have jurisdiction. At least get it on record that something's going on and somebody should look into it. Isolation is another thing. If suddenly you can't reach your loved one, they're not answering the phone, they're not responding to emails or messages, it's another sign that you need to look in and make sure things are okay. I mean, there's any number of scenarios that can happen. Boy, I'll tell you, from personal experience, you just have to be diligent. The earlier you can stop something or identify it, the better the possibility is that the harm won't be permanent. Worst case scenario is, you know, and like they've explained before, some people aren't fortunate enough to have close family here in Santa Cruz. They may be on the East Coast. They may have become estranged from their family. They may not have a lot of neighbors that are close to them. And face it, everybody wants friends, everybody wants to have a companion. And somebody with an ulterior motive befriends them, maybe in a shopping center, maybe in a restaurant. And before you know it, they're into the bank account, they're on the mortgage, and they're draining it to the point where all the money's gone, and they're out of there, and the poor senior is left with nothing. That's what we want to do. So, take a look at the information that's on the application. It just expands upon what the information you'll get in a credit report and in a driver's license history. And there's no reason you can't ask them straight out, you got any convictions? They may lie, but at least you'll have something to compare it with on the other two reports that you get. So, knowledge is everything. Be involved. Don't rush through the decision. It's an important decision. And if you think that something is not right, better to call somebody and make a report than do that. Thank you.
I want to thank our panelists so much. I think that was really valuable and useful information. We have about 25 minutes now for questions. So who has a question?
Is IHSS person going to come?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, our other panelist, I got word that she was actually in a very, very minor car accident. So she's okay, but she's not going to make it today, unfortunately. If you do have questions about in-home support services, I can answer, or there are a couple other people in the room who are experts on that who can answer as well.
I have a couple of questions for the panel. Ms. Webster, yeah, you mentioned that it was a real problem if a care provider has no health insurance, but I guess I interpreted that it's not the client's responsibility to pay for the health insurance of the care provider, is it?
No.
Okay, good. So I didn't understand what the real problem was there. If they get sick?
If they get sick, they may not be able, if they get injured on the job, if they get sick, they may not be able to take care of themselves.
Ah, got it, okay. And then you also said, how does one, you said you're supposed to evaluate the values of a care provider. How do you do that?
Evaluate the values of your loved one. Do they prefer a male or female? Are they someone who's spent a lot of time alone in their lives, or do they value having conversations, someone who will chat it up?
Okay. And then, Mr. Atkinson, you also said that you shouldn't give money to care providers or keys to the house, but how does care provider realistically go grocery shopping or let themselves in the morning or do stuff if they don't have access to that, to the resources to do that?
Are you talking about somebody that's helping the individual?
Right, so if somebody's going grocery shopping for an elderly parent, or they have to go and buy their prescription, or they have to, purchase whatever it is, or give them keys so they can get in and out in the morning, or lock up in the afternoon if you have a patient with dementia who isn't going to know to carry the keys or to lock up or whatever, how do you prevent that?
That's a good question, and that's a unique circumstance. In hiring such a person, you'd want to have an idea about how much groceries for the week would cost.
Right.
The suggestion would be to have cash in a particular spot. At least you've limited the potential for taking money as opposed to giving them a credit card or a checkbook.
Okay.
I just have some suggestions for you on
Sure.
that, because I wish I would have had this information 7 years ago, because I've been through everything. I've been through the private, I've been through the agencies, home health agencies. Anyways, I had some experience and I learned a lot in the last 7 years. Currently, we use gift cards for grocery store. We currently have CVS pharmacy deliver the medications, and the receipts are kept and given to the accountant, and everything is pretty much handled at the end of the year by the accountant. Fortunately, my aunt has a trust attorney. I'm now a power of attorney. I wasn't expecting to be. She does have children, and it was unexpected, so I've learned a lot with home health and private caregivers. But I have to say that Santa Cruz County has the best resources as opposed to Monterey County. I haven't really had to deal with it. My aunt lives in Monterey County. So one positive experience I had was with the transitions program through the hospice program, which was a real benefit. And Monterey County does not have that. Basically, Monterey County says, oh no, you're hospice, you're preparing for end of life, and that's it. So there was no in between. So I was dealing with two different counties, and it was so hard to get somebody over there. I currently have 6 private caregivers. We have schedule, we have a weekly schedule, and we also have, I have 1 private agency currently, which I've been through 3 agencies so far, but she comes 1 day a week, and that's just to help cover sick days, vacations, and somebody I can depend on. The whole workers' comp issue, we've been through that. I found out my aunt did have workers' comp coverage through an umbrella policy through her home insurance, but now they're saying we need to get private workers' comp insurance, maybe through state comp or something. So that's another thing I'm learning. But I have a question about once you've hired those private caregivers, can you, after the fact, ask for those DMV records and the credit report after you've hired them? I mean, you're happy with them, can you still get that? I mean, is it a conflict saying, well, you know, you hired me, but now you want me to give you this information, is that okay to do that? I mean, it sounds like it would be, because I'm the employer, basically.
As a district attorney, I'm just stepping out of my area of expertise, but as the employer,
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
I think you can ask them at any time.
Ask someone after the fact to get their DMV record after you hired them, and credit history. It's okay. Sorry.
I was just-
Yeah. I think not everyone heard your answer.
The question was whether after you've hired somebody, can you then go back and ask them for a DMV printout and a credit report? It's a bit beyond my area of expertise. As the employer, I think you can make that a condition of continued employment.
Think about evaluating agency and how to compare agencies.
Yes, I can. You're looking, some agencies have nurses involved, that's always better. You definitely want to make sure that they have workers' comp and liability insurance. There are some home care agencies in Santa Cruz County that don't have that same kind of employer relationship. They basically just act like a referral agency, so they're not doing any supervising of their home care aides. So that's another good question, is if they tell you that you'll be writing a check directly to the caregiver, then you're not going to be getting the advantages of a home care agency.
Let me just add also that you may want to ask, what kind of training do they do for their staff? Do they have training? Because that's not consistent. What kind of background checks do they do? Again, it's an unregulated field, more or less. So anyone can put up a sign saying they do home care. So it doesn't mean they're following all the best practices that are laid out today. So you just really want to check that they're doing that. And the training part, I think, is really important. You're not just bringing somebody in.
Is this the form that you were talking about, this great big many-paged?
Yes.
Is that the application form?
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
What are the first couple steps you have to take to get hired for in-home support services after viewing this presentation? I mean, I know the in-home support service person isn't here, but
So I can respond to that, actually. In-home supportive services is another program within our division through the county. So basically we have an entity called the Public Authority, and you can call them. The phone number and information is on the county website. And there are some requirements for background checks. For the last couple of years, all IHSS providers have to clear a background check. They need to watch an orientation video. They need to provide identification, fill out some forms, but the Public Authority can assist providers going through that process. It's, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but it's good from both sides because it really ensures that we're not sending, you know, somebody with a criminal background into the home of a vulnerable individual. Services is basically a program that serves people, Medi-Cal eligible, elderly, blind, and disabled people, but the income requirement is that you're Medi-Cal eligible. And again, there's information on the county website how to apply. And there's a phone number, and you can always call and consult with our screener to see eligibility for yourself or for a loved one. But it's basically we provide in-home care to keep people safely and independently at home.
I don't know where to start off. I just want to say, you know, wouldn't it be a good thing to do on the in-home support level to get a clearance letter from the sheriff's department if they're with any of these people? Because me being on the other side of the end, you know, hiring the, you know, a caregiver, that I'm permanently totally disabled, that I've went through a couple. I've already been robbed just by hearing tell by lawyers and fiduciaries, because they're running rampage, you know. They've stolen over a couple